Hello everyone, welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is episode 243 of the podcast. I am Kat Caldwell and welcome to Halloween week. If you're in the Western world, maybe it's just the Western world. Well, if you celebrate Halloween or you celebrate All Saints Day, this is one of those weeks, isn't it? And Diwali, I guess, starts as well this week. It's just a big week. So to celebrate Halloween, I brought in a friend of mine to talk about horror stories, specifically children's horror stories, which at first I thought was a little strange as a topic, but then she started talking to me about what are considered horror stories, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've read like half of those as a kid. So we are going to talk about what makes a children's horror story. Her name is Rebecca Dolence, and she's going to tell us, kind of the tropes that you need, the things that you should leave out, specific to children. And then I'll have her back and we can talk about the difference with adult horror stories. I think we talk about this too, like horror seems like such a strange word sometimes. I don't know what kind of household you were brought up in, but for like the first half of my life, we didn't celebrate Halloween because it was like too scary. And then my mom like stopped caring. and I don't really like horror movies, like the gory ones, but then it's interesting to hear that, there's a whole other category of like psychological horror, which I have seen some of those and do enjoy them. So I don't know. I learned a lot. I hope that you'll learn a lot. And if you're thinking about writing scary stories for kids, you're not alone. So come stick with us and you'll get to that interview in just a second. Some of you might know that NaNoWriMo is coming up and there's a lot of controversy about it. And there are some people kind of capitalizing on the controversy about it, especially for those who really liked Nano and, were looking forward to it. And now it's, I don't know, some people are deciding not to participate. I believe I don't get involved in these little discussions. But it seems to me like this year it is about like their stance on AI. To me, the idea that they weren't very proactive in getting rid of people who were being inappropriate with minors, and they knew about it is a little more important to me than their stance on AI. But it's okay, whatever, wherever you came in on the game, if you are not participating in NaNoWriMo, there's a couple of people out there who are doing something instead. Lots of writer groups. So just check around Facebook. Sarah Cannon, I know, is doing something, though I don't know if it's still open. But here's the thing with NaNoWriMo. I was always frustrated with it. This started like 20 years ago, right? So I first found out about it when I was living in France with little babies. And while, the idea was kind of exciting, I also found it very frustrating because November is a very busy month, especially for moms, whether you work at home, you work full time as a kid, raising children, or you work full time outside of the home and you're raising children. It's just a really busy month and it's like the worst month ever. I just found it like super anti-mom to choose November. And here's the thing, like, while I can understand the idea of wanting to encourage people to write every day and to really get their book done, I can admire that. There was a message that I sent out to my newsletter this week that seemed to resonate with a lot of people. And I say that because I received like 20 emails in reply, and I'm still receiving replies from people who enjoyed the newsletter. And I don't usually get that many replies. Like I might get 5, not 20. And I can see right now on my email, I actually have 2 more that I haven't read. So this message seemed to resonate with people. And the message was that the book that you are writing is going to take the time that it takes to write it. While we can participate in these summits and we can get new tools, and we can always be searching for something that will help us write faster, better, get the book out now, put the pressure on ourselves. Ultimately, if you are thinking and working on your book a couple times a week, that is enough. It is okay. And I came up with this idea because, well, it's not my own idea, right? But I wrote this up because the truth is I am always looking for a way to write faster because I have more ideas in my head than time to put them on paper. But the other problem is I sometimes take a while to figure out that thing that each book needs. So the book that I am working with now, still the second one for my historical romance. And while I had a really busy no, October, it's not November yet, but it's almost, but I had a super busy October. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to write. I wanted it to be done before I got busy. It didn't happen because I know that there's something wrong with it. So then I figured out, I was walking one day and I was like, oh my goodness, I figured it out. I know what it is. And now I'm really anxious to just get it done. So I'm almost done, right? I'm like 5 chapters away from being done. And I sat down the other day and I was writing, I was fixing, it's the manuscript is done, but there's like something missing to it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm very excited about this now. I think that I'm going to actually finish it this weekend. This is great. And then I actually realized that I had an entire like mini plot that I hadn't wrapped up at all. I'd completely forgotten about it until I was sort of rereading, the next chapter that I had to edit and make sure things were right. So I have to go back and I have to redo the scene that I just redid to make sure that there's a little rabbit trail in that scene so that I can wrap up this little nugget of the story. So yes, there are people out there who are so invested in their series and their characters that they're just churning out, this long series of life of this town or this planet or this school or whatever, and they're in it and I don't know, maybe they just have a talent I don't have. Maybe they're just have been inside that world so much that they know it and they don't forget the nuggets of information. I pretty much write standalones, even if they might be interconnected as series. So maybe I'm giving myself excuses here because in the end, it's taking the time that it's going to take. And because I'm not willing to let go of it until my gut is willing to let go of it, I'm going to have to be okay with that. And it really is okay. Once it's out, I will find the readers, they will enjoy it, and I will be writing something else, and it's okay. Whether it had finished yesterday or a month ago just doesn't make that much of a difference in the scheme of life. And what's funny is I was talking to my friend Stacy Juba, who is going to edit it, and she got really sick this last month. And could not have been editing it. And so there you go. Like, it's funny how it's like, well, then why do I feel, I know a lot of it's just internal, but I just want to let you know it is okay to not let go of your book yet. If you're not ready to let go of it, it's also okay to let go of it to an editor. If you're kind of done and you need some brainstorming, it is okay to get a coach for a couple sessions. If you feel like you need it, it is okay to take a break and come back. There is no real pressure, right? Unless you have sold a contract and been paid for it. And then if you're stuck, I would get a coach or somebody to like help you, right? But sometimes we just need the time to marinate in the story and in the book. And the book just has the gestation that it has. And there isn't any magic bullet to it. As many classes or workshops that you go to, as many craft books as you read. I likened it to baking a cake. You can sort of claim that you're taking a cup of this book here and a pinch of that workshop here. But in the end, you've got to put the batter into the tin and stick it in the oven, and it has to bake for the amount of time that it has to bake. There's no pushing it, right? There's no making it go faster. Excuse me, I had to cough off camera. So I just hope that that encourages you a little. I know that sometimes, depending on your personality, it might be difficult to look around and see people just churning out books. It might be difficult to walk into a bookstore and be like, oh my gosh, all these other people got their book done. Why can't I get mine done? It's okay. Your book is marinating. It has a longer gestation. It's okay. Just let it be. Keep thinking about it. Keep working on it. Get the help that you think you need. If you do want to go faster, then I would recommend finding a coach. And I've interviewed quite a few of them, and I can recommend one to you, or you can, talk to me and see if I'm a good fit for you. But if I'm not, or if you're looking for something specific, I will help you. I will help you find somebody. Otherwise, you know, just take that pressure off. It's your book is going to be great. And you know what? You're going to be more proud of it if you take the time that you feel that you need. Okay. So I hope that that encourages you guys a little bit. Because I got to say it to myself quite often. But if you are writing a children's horror story and you're needing a little push, I've got just the push for you. We are going to talk to Rebecca Dolence in just a second. Before I get into the interview, I always forget to tell you guys, if you like the podcast, please like and subscribe on whatever platform it is that you're listening. If you're on YouTube, it helps to, I think, follow, subscribe. I don't know. I don't know what you're supposed to do. Follow, like, subscribe, do the things. And if you enjoy it and you have a writer friend, please share the podcast. We haven't had any reviews in a while. It would maybe help if you review it. I don't really know. I am not looking to make this podcast super mega big. I love all of you who listen. I loved meeting Bill a couple weeks ago who said, "Oh, I listened to your podcast." I love that. I feel like we're a little like a small family, and I don't want us to be like a million people family. I want to keep us cozy. But all that to say, definitely share it because I know I'm like contradicting myself here. If you guys are looking for more writing tips and thoughts and all this stuff, you can either subscribe to my newsletter, which the link is below. You can also follow me on Substack, and my writing tips are free. And I'm also doing a thing there where I share my short stories and the critique that I get back from my short stories. If I get critiques back, if I've sent them off to a contest or a magazine. And that is like subscribe to. You can read the short story, but to read the critique, you have to subscribe. That's just a little thing. If you want to support me and my work, it kind of goes all into the podcast and all that because I don't monetize the podcast. If you're listening on Spotify and you get an ad, that's Spotify. Sorry. So if you are looking for more of me, go to Substack, lessonsinstory.substack.com, or you can get on my newsletter, or you can follow me on almost all of the social media. All right. So without further ado, let's talk to Rebecca about scary stories. It's October, everybody. It's the time of year that horror writers sharpen their pencils and lipstick liners. And maybe our best friend will be eaten by a Bogart in our story, and maybe he won't. Or maybe we can lock a group of strangers in a dimly lit cellar, and furry creatures with fangs as long as claws scrape at the staircase leading to their only exit. But don't worry, we're going to avoid dolls that move on their own when no one is watching, and hope we don't trip while running from the guy with the chainsaw. If you're too scared, turn on the lights. Creatures hate bright lights. They always disappear. Keep some iron in your pocket. Monsters fear the metal. And in case you were wondering, no, we're not saving the children from scary stuff. We're cooking them in the filling. Oh my gosh, Rebecca. I have one of my favorite horror writers and horror coaches on the show today. I have Rebecca Dolence. Did I say that right?
You sure did.
And we are going to talk about writing horror. How are you doing, Rebecca?
I am doing great. I'm wearing my Thinking of You shirt with the pinpricks all in it. So I am ready to go, feeling good. And we're going to talk about writing horror for little kids,
For
for
kids.
middle graders.
So maybe some people think like, why would you write horror for kids? But it's a thing. I mean, think of the fairy tales. Those are
Fairy
horror.
tale go on to what is that, Freeform right now. You got Hocus Pocus, you got, Nightmare Before Christmas, we could go down the list, Transylvania. These are all middle grade horror flicks.
How did you get into horror? Did you like it as a middle schooler?
Alright, I'm gonna date myself. My first horror flick was Gremlins.
Oh my gosh, my brother freaked me out with Gremlins. Like for real. Oh my gosh, that's true. It is a horror.
Yeah, it's a
It's a
horror
scary
flick, but
movie.
it's still for younger people because there's no blood and guts. I mean, we'll get into all this, but there's no blood and guts spewing all over the place. It's a fun. You have an antagonist and you have someone that's trying to stop the antagonist from making gremlins all over the world. What could be better?
Literally, how did they come up with that? But as a kid, I was afraid of monsters under the bed. Like every time the lights went out
And boogeymen in the closet
and the
and
witch
things
might come and eat
scraping
you.
at the windows when you're trying to fall asleep.
Oh my gosh, the branch near your window, even though you know the tree's right there because you climb it all the time.
And it's right there, but somehow your brain does crazy things. So, yeah, I was hoping today we can talk about not just middle grade writing, maybe some basics of it to for your listeners and viewers, but how to kind of get involved with writing some of the horror scenes, but for appropriate age groups.
Ooh, that's pretty important, I think.
I would think so too, because when I watched Jason, the first movie, at far too young, that changes your whole world. It's so cool. So my nephew is 7,
Okay.
and he runs around wearing Michael Myers clothes, mask. He's got the little plastic knife everywhere. He's 7. He's never seen any of the movies because it's too much. But he
Mhm.
watches them on I think it's like a Lego YouTube
Oh,
video or something of all these characters. So they're happy and they go lucky, but they have their full costume on, and he loves it. He wants to be Chucky, he wants to do this. I was just visiting with him this past weekend. He's running around. He's a little guy. He's 7. He's running around this whole park, this farm that we went to, this apple orchard farm thing, and he's got his Beetlejuice outfit on. And he's got his mask in his hand that looks just like Beetlejuice. He's just running around and playing. He's having a great time. Does he know about the scary part? No, but Beetlejuice is also for younger people, so it's
right.
okay.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the basics um, for horror writing for kids. I think it's so funny because I think, do we usually call it scary movies or scary
You know
instead
what?
of
That is really
horror?
important because when I was looking up, like, some of the books I read, like Neil Gaiman has written the Graveyard Book, Coraline. Those are kind of
Mhm.
weird, creepy, but they're mentally weird, creepy.
Yeah.
When I looked at those and I looked at like Always October or I looked at movies, it doesn't say horror at that young
Interesting.
age. It'll say scary, it'll say
Okay.
monster, it'll use the word creepy, like, when you break it down into the ISBN, you can see all that. It's not labeled as horror, so you have to kinda look for that.
Okay. But
'Cause
do you sort of, are the basics the same or are the basics different for
it
writing for middle schoolers versus adults?
You know what? There's a difference with maybe, if everything goes well, you can have me on again. We can discuss
Okay, we'll do
young
adult.
adult and adult because, there's stages of the
Okay.
brain, the way your brain moves and thinks,
Okay.
middle graders aren't really into the world.
Okay.
They only know their home, their playgrounds, their soccer games. So they really haven't experienced the world the way us adults have of seeing
Right.
really traumatizing things, luckily, hopefully. So there's a different way to write for each one of those. So we'll stick to middle grade for the time being, because when you throw in the gore and the slasher movies and and things that really can twist someone's belly, that's not for middle grade.
That's not for middle grade. All right. So when you so I did read The Graveyard. I have not read Always October. So the Graveyard book, I feel like, do you feel like Neil Gaiman writes a little higher? Like are they for middle grade
I would
or
say it's a higher level middle grade.
like an intellectually, right? Like he gets a little, I don't know. It's not as he's British.
He's British. What can you say? They think smarter than us Americans.
They have that accent. I don't know. So how does that compare with Always October? I haven't read that one.
Always October would be a younger middle grade age group.
Okay.
But they follow the same lines, the same basic concept of all middle grade. To keep the sentences short,
Mm,
that there's not really challenging words.
okay.
There's short chapters, there's short sentences. Everything follows chronological order. You still have a setting. So all these still play the same role. And when you're looking at younger middle grade versus a little bit older middle grade, the discrepancy, like you're saying, Neil Gaiman writes a little bit higher,
Mm,
a higher intellect for reading, but at the same time, it's the same type of scare.
okay.
So Neil Gaiman will start off with the man was holding a knife. It was a sharp knife that could cut through you without you even knowing, not immediately. That's a great opening
Yes.
line. I know that was paraphrased because I don't remember.
No, I love that opening to the graveyard book. It's pretty creepy.
It's creepy right away. And what happens is this guy, a man named Jack, he's the antagonist. He kills a whole family. And to some viewers, readers could be like, "Oh my God, how can you do that?" But it's written so well. There's
Yeah.
there's no blood. There's no screams. There's no terror in that. It's almost I don't know, just literal information of the guy walked up the stairs and he wiped off his blade. Didn't ever mention the word blood, but he wipes off his blade and he goes for the kid who's left to the graveyard. So there's intricacies, and with Always October, it starts out with we have 2 weeks before my little brother Jake turns into a monster.
Oh, that's intriguing.
Right. So it catches the reader's attention, but then it still goes into the storyline.
Yeah.
Because regardless of any kind of story that you want to write, you still have your character that has to change by the end, and you have an antagonist or something that's trying to stop them, plain and
Mm,
simple. So
right.
when you're going through the chronological aspects of horror, you still have a basic storyline, but your antagonist is throwing you off with scary stuff
Yes.
versus, the bully at school. It's the
Yeah.
same concept, but it's just that slight adjustment to make prickle you the hairs on the back of your neck.
Like a prickle. So when you're talking about like the character arc, they're still trying to overcome. Is it a lot of times they're trying to overcome a fear in horror, or does it have to, or could it be kind of anything? Um, are there
I
like
know.
certain, yeah,
No, it's not necessarily a fear of
okay.
something.
Mm,
So for instance, we'll go back. We could throw in Hocus Pocus,
yeah,
right? The movie Hocus Pocus. The kid opens the book, which is a trope of horror, is the scary like necromancer, whatever book it's called. And I know I didn't say that right, so don't judge me. But
I have no
there's
idea how
this
to say
trope.
it.
You have the scary book, or
Yes,
you have the cabin in the woods, whatever. And in Hocus Pocus, it's not that he has a fear of witches
yeah,
at all. It's about, he meets a girl, he's trying to stop the witches, and there's a scare factor, when they're in the boiler room in the basement and trying to push the witches in, and they think everything's good, and it's not good.
right.
But throughout the whole process, this the protagonist, the boy, I don't remember his name offhand. He's learning everything. He's learning how to
Mhm.
be himself. He's learning how to awaken, feelings inside of him that he's never had before. So it's
Yeah.
not about fighting a fear per se. It's still about growing. And it just so happens that there's a lot of scary witches that are help pushing him forward.
Right, right. So when you're thinking about like middle grade, that's not sort of paralleling it, you with horror, you're throwing in the sort of speed bumps are something scary, or like maybe a more scary-ish, creepy villain, whereas like it's not just like a mean teacher or mom and dad are getting divorced or something like that, where that might be more of a literary middle. middle school,
Unless
right?
the mean teacher actually secretly is,
Is a
like
vampire.
doing something else, and when they're not looking, and everyone's got this weird feeling like there's something wrong with this teacher. Why doesn't anyone believe me?
Yeah. Oh, that would be a good one. Is that?
Right,
I'm sure
there's something wrong with that. I just finished reading, it was called Demon Dentist. Again, it was a British person, but that was a concept like the person came up on stage, I'm going to be your new dentist. And this boy is like, there's something wrong here. I don't trust this person. It's using that's teaching kids how to use their gut, how to use their
Mm,
intuition. As
right,
opposed to, okay, someone told you what to do, just do it. No, think for yourself,
right.
feel for yourself. And of course, the dentist turned into, a witchy lady who stole teeth from underneath your pillowcases and left like little eyeballs
Oh my
or
gosh,
or,
that is
or
creepy.
creepy crawly things or something. So, again, it's not really gross.
Mm,
Like the Nightmare Before Christmas. There's a lot of gross things in there,
yeah.
but
But it
but
doesn't like make you so, like some of the horror, the adult horrors, I almost can't because I'm such a visual person that I'll literally have dreams for days on end. But the younger scary movies I can do because they're gross in a different way. They're not, I don't know. I guess as an adult, maybe I'm like, well, that can't happen. But a man with a chainsaw could totally come into
right, let's hide behind the chainsaws. That
what's
commercial
that
just
noise?
popped up. Let's hide behind the chainsaws. It goes through, like, every trope of horror, which is great. So
So how important is this setting in, I mean, I guess you could set it anywhere. Like Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard book is interesting in that he starts living in the graveyard, right? Like and the ghosts actually aren't scary. Like that they're
right,
his family, which, it kind of throws a trope upside down of like, no, they're actually the kind people versus like the humans are the scary people.
right.
So how it
Um,
like can you pretty much use any setting in middle grade?
well, think of it this way, what's creepy to you and I is a different kind of creepy
Oh, okay.
to a young person, who's again, just experiencing the world. So what's creepy to a kid? Maybe the scary basement at school, like the boiler room.
Right.
um, a graveyard, maybe a forest that feels like it's haunted because there's little
Right.
creatures walking around. So instead of the werewolf that's going to eat your face, and we're going to describe that, we're going to say maybe he tiptoes with like a red little basket, and he tiptoes around trees, and that's how he tries to scare people. It's more simple. And
Okay.
going on like what you were saying is I think that y- to adults it's almost cheesy.
Mm.
It has a cheesy aspect, like, "Oh, that's not really that scary," but if you look over at your, 12-year-old daughter's son and they're going, "Oh, no," that's awesome,
Yeah.
that's exactly what you wanted to do, or they're yelling like, "Get out of there. He's in the closet," which is a completely different kind of scary
Yeah.
than something like Stephen King would write.
Right.
It's simple. So we gotta, as writers, we have to go back to simplicity and put ourselves in little people's shoes again.
Yeah.
And go back to my little nephew who runs around and having a great time looking like some scary villain. Having fun though. And
Yeah.
that's part of it too, because you can't in slasher movies, you constantly have adult, right? So any kind of slasher movie, there's this constant cringe, constant fear.
Right.
And you want to mix in your humor. So you can go into an adult one and you can find some humor into it. But with kids, like add the humor. Don't constantly keep it like treacherous and overwhelming because they're never going to be able to sleep ever again. So you add in these twists,
Right.
they're going through that forest and a rock flew. Oh no, wait. They look up, and it could be scary, but it was an owl dropped a rock or something.
Right.
It's just little bits of um, like a mini terror, but for that age group. So
That's interesting. You have to give them like relief. And it's almost like you're teaching them that the world can feel scary, but a lot of that isn't, is just regular. Like it is scary when there's sounds outside, but if you open the curtains and see it's just the tree or it's just the owl, like it's, I guess we have to go back to that age and realize your world is starting to open. And so everything new is scary. And so you just sort of have to like be part of that societal group that shows them little by little you can confront it, right? Like the owl dropping the rock is like, that's gonna make you jump, but you're okay.
You're okay. You're gonna get through. You're gonna push through. And going back to that concept of listening to yourself, listening to what you need in life without
Mm.
being told constantly what to do, which leads to no adults. You really can't have adults in middle grade
No.
because again, these kids are they're trying to figure themselves out into the
Okay.
world, and they need each other. They're figuring out who they are, who their friends are, who are they going to be when they grow up. And when you throw in adults in there that are going to save the day or constantly tell them what to do, where's the part where the child that's reading that book learns? Because they
Okay.
just see what they see every day in life of mom keeps telling me what to do. Because the point is, when you open a book, you have this great imaginary world and
Yeah.
you can open yourself up and you can feel really good and you can have empathy for other people, for feelings that maybe you didn't have. And when you throw in the parent, it just ruins everything.
Right.
You don't
Right.
want to you don't want to ruin everything with a parent finishing and fixing everything. It's like they
No.
have to that part of that writing and receiving is helping a kid acknowledge I can figure out my own problems. I can be a problem
Yeah.
solver.
Okay.
And that's
Okay.
so important to be that problem solver all on their own. And now
Yeah.
you throw in a scary ghost thing.
Yes, and you throw in the scary, but I think that's a good thing to remember, especially if you're starting out writing middle grade, to not throw, because you're most likely an adult by that point, and you're like, oh, but in the real world, an adult would come. Like, no, we're reading
No,
to not be in the real world.
that's exactly what you're trying to stay out of the real world. And I think with Kid Lit, what we're doing as writers is we're helping them expand. We're helping their minds open up to a whole different world. And how can
Yeah.
you do that if it parallels what they have right now?
Okay. Okay.
So
So
that's
how would you create the perfect monster? Is there a perfect monster for middle grade? Or are there things like you said just to stay away from?
well, you could have a slasher type guy like Michael Myers. You can absolutely have that. Jack
That's
in the
true.
Graveyard Book was a slasher guy.
Yeah.
You didn't read about the bud. You didn't hear about, the screams and that. It was the boy trying to figure out how to stop this guy. Once he figures out he's after him. He's
Okay.
gotta figure it out. So you can have really any kind at all. I mean, it could be an absolute psychopath, but it's how you write it
Okay.
for that child to say, it's he's not popping off, baby heads or something, or maybe that baby doll heads. Maybe that's what the bad guy does. He goes around, he pops off all the heads of all the dolls and the kids in the town.
Yeah.
Why not? You know what? That sounds like a good
Why not?
story.
That is kind of creepy. Okay. So it really comes down to, it can be anything from like an imaginary monster to a real witch that they can figure out to an actual slasher, but we're coming down to the description. It almost feels like more psychological than visual in the
Yes,
scare.
absolutely. It would be
Okay.
it would be because if you write about, a tooth bleeding, uh, my 7-year-old nephew again. I said, "Hey, there's blood on that knife." He goes, "Oh, no, no blood, no blood." That concept of blood freaked him out. It can be the
Right.
knife that has fake blood in it. He can say it's fake blood, but when it comes to like if I say something that was real, whoa, whoa,
Oh,
whoa, that was too scary. 'Cause
okay.
true blood, if you add in, like, the smell of blood, that iron smell and I don't know, it turns my belly. I know I'm a horror person, but I don't like raw meat. Ugh. That's fearful to me.
If anyone wants to freak out Rebecca, write a story about a guy just dropping raw meat all over the place.
Ugh. started doing that for my dogs. I would get that raw meat stuff. I'm like, "I can't. I'm sorry, guys. You cannot have this.
You can go hunt yourselves.
Go hunt yourselves. Be the real dogs you are."
All
Uh,
right. So does that mean then that you kind of have to find a way to be around this age group in order to know like kind of what is scary, or just read the middle grade to make sure that you're not kind of going overboard? Or how would you tell writers to sort of make sure they're kind of staying within the the boundaries of?
well, I would say it would be a combination, right? So
Okay.
you do have to understand how their brains think. Um, I don't recommend sitting at a playground and listening to children for hours on end because it might look a little creepy.
Yes.
So if you can't do that and it seems like it could be illegal, read, read,
Okay.
read, read. Read the books, watch the movies. I'm going to have an article coming out of specifics of
Okay.
middle grade and horror. There's plenty of people that have stuff out there. I actually read R.L. Stein, the Goosebumps guy.
Yeah.
He actually wrote a how to write horror book for kids. So
Oh,
there's plenty of resources out there, but you don't really have to have an imagination.
yeah. Because Goosebumps, wasn't it? I think that in Are You Afraid of the Dark, and like, I mean, it kind of went along the Scooby Doo thing all the time. Like there was always an explanation, or am I not remembering correctly? Like there always felt
Yeah,
like
there
there was
was
an
like,
explanation for
which is
things.
awesome
Yeah.
because how many times do we say, why did this person do this? So if you
Yeah.
have an antagonist that explains why they do that, oh, then you get an understanding. The Jack, he had a reason at the end, can't give it away. The demon dentist book I was talking about, that the angry witch, tooth witch, I think she was called. She had a reason for doing all that she does, and maybe it's
Oh,
something like, I hate kids, I want to scare kids, or I want to take over the world with a big bag of teeth. It could be something.
yeah.
It's all about write your story, and even if it starts out gruesome, no matter what, you still have the plot line of the protagonist needs to do this, and how are they gonna get there by the end? And because something was thrown at them, and now they have to adjust.
Right.
So, with Jack, in the Graveyard Book, the
Hmm.
boy Bod, his name is Nobody,
I
but they
love that
call him
though.
Bod. He's learning about life. He
Yeah.
doesn't have normal parents per se, but isn't that a great analogy of people, maybe of kids that have divorced parents, that they feel torn and they don't know where to go? Or, think of different analogies of how that can bring out different emotions in a kid, because Bod had nobody but dead people around him that he learned from. So
Right.
how is he going to learn about the world? He,
Yeah.
he, he explores a graveyard. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. And he's kind of the weird kid, right? Because he has dead people teaching him about the world. I mean, you can do some really fun things with middle grade fiction that you, like you say, almost can't with adult fiction because adults will find it cheesy, even though we love reading the middle grade fiction.
Maybe some of us really need help understanding our feelings from when we were a kid now that we're adults.
I
You
need
know,
to learn how to confront the world still.
so I'm gonna keep reading middle grade. And, it's pretty much one plot. That's what's
Okay.
great about Kid Lit.
Okay.
It's really one plot. So that one plot without all the little side subplots, it really
Mm,
gets if you write this so your character is truly seeing emotions and how to move through the world, you're gonna bring out so much in the character that the kids are gonna be, "Oh, I love this guy." Some kids will be like, "Oh, I love the scary monster guy," because they can relate to it because their world feels chaotic, their bodies change and everything's crazy. So maybe they love the antagonist best because they can
mm,
almost like vicariously through them by causing trouble
okay.
that they
Yes.
won't do at home, because then they'll get suspended and grounded, and they gotta be good kids, but they can take their imaginary world to be, oh, I mean, Spike in Gremlins, Spike was my favorite character, not Gizmo. It was the bad guy
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that was causing trouble.
But that's interesting what you said is probably one of the fundamentals of middle grade is one plot line, not this under, not all these subplots. So that gets into more high school. Um,
Hmm.
so that's something very important to keep in mind as a writer. Like you don't, I mean, it's kind of a relief. You don't have to make any subplots, but
Right?
if you are, maybe just cut them because he doesn't also need to like have, yeah, I don't know. You don't need a million characters and you don't need a million subplots.
You
Just,
know, keep it simple. Keep it simple, silly. Just
yes.
going around that, just keep it. And that's really helpful too. One, I think it's really hard to write young people kid-lit
Mm,
because it really takes us out of, we have to really leave our space and take ourselves away. But by keeping it simple, um, wow, you could have so much fun writing
yeah.
this whole plot line and all the different steps of what the antagonist is doing to send them back 2 steps so they can move forward a step and back 2 steps. But that's life.
Yeah.
That's the whole
Yeah.
point. And because it's scary in some sense, you got to add humor.
Mm,
So in the Graveyard Book, for instance, there is a section where he meets a real girl. He's a real boy, but he can live in the cemetery and kind of fade out, I think it's called. So he meets this girl. No one else can see him but this girl who's the same age.
yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, mom, I met a friend." And mom's saying, "Oh, it's nice to have an imaginary friend." And she goes back to the cemetery. I don't know why they visit cemetery all the time, but they didn't get into it. She goes back to the cemetery and says, "Well, I guess you're my imaginary friend, but it's okay. I guess we all have imaginary friends." Like there's humor in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
humor. There's a lot of humor that even in adult and young adult, you have to have that humor
Mm.
twist to not have, like we already talked about, that constant anxiety.
Yes. Well, that's fun too, because you can look back on your times where you, as a kid, the adults would have some sort of dumb explanation for something, and you're like, that's totally wrong, but it's not worth arguing and getting in trouble with that adult
Oh,
right
your
now.
mom, wrong mom. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
like
sure
he's
you
a
hear that
real
all the
kid,
time.
oh, whatever. But adding in that humor, you kind of, as the middle grade reader, get to poke fun at adults and poke fun at the world, right? Like, because you get that humor, you get to be part of that joke.
Right.
Oh, I
It's
like that. But I think you also said something interesting in that the antagonist has to have a reason behind their stuff. Like that, I think that's very important for a book to go somewhere, to be successful, because I think sometimes we think the antagonists are just, we don't spend as much time developing them, maybe.
and they're the best.
Yeah. I mean,
They're the best.
honestly, it is weird because I'm trying to think, there's so many times that we love the antagonist more.
'Cause
Like, but it's because the writer actually developed them properly, right? And they're like, my favorite antagonist is somebody who's very human but like very flawed, but you can kind of see like the glimmer of hope in them,
sure.
but then they're also just wreak chaos and they just don't care about anyone else.
The 3 witches in Hocus Pocus, you love them because 'cause they're funny, right? You got the one silly one and the other one that uses a vacuum to fly around because she couldn't find her broom. I mean, there's humor in that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we need it. We need that humor, we need those flaws because oh, the Black River of Death. I
What's
don't know if
that?
you remember. So there's a street, and the sisters grew up,
Oh, that's
were alive when there was no street. So like the Black River of Death. But that's fun. These
yeah.
antagonists, they're trying to get their book back. They're trying to take over the world. There's two people and the kid that's trying to fix it with the cat. And
Yes,
and
that's right.
and you have all these flaws. There's clearly flaws. And each one of them. I mean, if I jump forward to like the Saw movies,
Mm,
personally, I have an issue with them. One, because I can't believe someone thought of that. How the craziness of Saw. But it took, I think it was the fifth one, that they finally explained who the antagonist was. I was like, finally, and why he's doing it.
right, right, right.
It took a lot of gruesome movies, and no, I do not recommend those for middle graders because those are,
Or for adults, quite frankly.
they're out there. They are gruesome.
They're
They're
crazy.
they're psychologically crazy.
Yes. And I almost think that that was a mistake for that. I feel like you could get more readers if it's almost clear what, like, somehow you feel as a reader that you understand the antagonist, even if you have it completely wrong. Like with
Right.
the Graveyard Book, I was like, I mean, there's humor in the fact that the slasher is named Jack because they're, like, that's not really their name. It's just the jack of all trades, like he's using all this humor with, very intellectual because he's British again, but
Yeah,
you
right.
feel very smart when you're reading it. But like, even if you get it wrong, like feeling like you're part of understanding the antagonist is part of the fun.
That is absolutely part of the fun. I send out a creature of the month every month at the end of the month. Something probably people have known, probably some things, some creatures that people don't know. You can use every single one of them, like a Bogart, a boogeyman, a screaming banshee. All of these and think about a screaming banshee for a second. They, we've 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 depicted her as some crazy lady, which we
Hmm.
can go into the sociotypes of that some other time, but we depict her as some crazy lady who's screaming all the time, that's wreaking havoc and saying, anybody who hears her is gonna die.
Hmm.
You can use that in adult as well as you can middle grade. In adult,
Right.
it's probably gonna be bleeding eyeballs, and when she screams, maybe she cries blood. That's you can make that kind of gross. However, for middle grade, maybe she looks really innocent during the day, and it isn't until she knows someone's gonna die that she transforms. So
Right.
then you have, the protagonist is like, "Wait, why is this person adjust and change?" So you do get a different perspective of the antagonist.
Yeah.
There's always a reason. Everybody's awesome. And just because let me go back for a second. I got excited. Um, Villains aren't created. Villains are made.
Oh,
So you can look at Darth Vader.
yeah.
He started out as this anarchist, and he thought he was doing really great in the whole world. I know we're switching genres for a second, but this popped in my head. He 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 was living through this world, and he realized he had a gift. But everything, all these social, political things kept happening, kept hurting his family. His
Hmm.
mom was killed, his wife was killed, and pretty soon he's saying, "None of you are listening to me." And now here comes Darth Vader. The Joker, the last Joker movie, phenomenal. No one's listening to me. So in order to listen, he had to turn into something, and all of a sudden people are paying attention. This Saw
Right.
guy, right? What's his name? Sam or I don't know. That's Trick or Treater. Um, Something had to happen for
Right.
them to say, "I'm going to get you back."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Jason doesn't like horny teenagers, which is a trope in horror, because he drowned in a lake because some teenagers were humping over there by the trees. So it created something
Right. Right.
in
It
in
gives
them.
them that reason.
Yeah.
We don't, yeah. So for anything, so that's an interesting way to put it. Like, how does your antagonist come out of the ashes of their normal life and transform into this? And that, I think that just is a different way that will give your antagonist depth, right? If you think of, like, what has happened to sort of press this antagonist into becoming the person going out and strangling or murdering, or
Well, that's part of your character arc when you're building it, or your world building when you're first starting the book is, you're figuring out who are your characters, not about hair color or what if they wear glasses, no, but who are they on the inside?
Mm,
And
right.
what experiences in life have made them this person. So whether
Right.
that's a 12-year-old protagonist or the slasher dude, they all started as kids and they all had experiences that did something with their brain, right?
Yeah.
You and I could have grown up in the same my brother and I, let me say, we grew up in the same household, but we're completely opposite people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But why is that? Why was he treated different? What happened in his brain and his experiences that made him so different than my experiences and made me who I am.
Right,
And
right.
that's important in life, that's important in books, is to recognize the psychology of people,
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
understand
absolutely.
archetypes and how we all can merge together, how we can work together, or how never some of us will never work together.
Yeah. Yes. And giving the reasons to that. So when this is kind of your niche. How do you help writers? You work um how does your coaching go with writers when you're helping them sort of develop this? I want to write a middle grade book and I kind of like horror and I kind of want to merge my passions with that. So what do you do as a book coach?
I would start out with no, I start out with nothing different than I would for a contemporary book. Without all the scary stuff. But honestly, I think contemporary books sometimes are scarier than the horror books. It's uh, you still gotta create your world. You still gotta create your setting. If like in a contemporary life, um, living in Los Angeles is going to be completely different than the setting of living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Really different cultures, really different everything. So no matter whether you add the bad guys being scary or not, you still create that world, that setting. You still have to create, okay, who's it like we talked about, who is the protagonist? Who are they inside? What's their backstory? Not that you're actually going to have to use it in your book, but maybe you use if you figure out what happened that made them this way, whether that's the antagonist or the protagonist, what made them this way, that will help you develop that storyline of why they make certain choices.
Mm, okay.
You still have to have the arc of the character. You still have to have no adults allowed or keep them at a real minimum. So whether
Yeah.
that's fantasy, contemporary, or horror, either way, you still have to develop your baseline and understand how one a child's mentality, and two, how to write short sentences, how to keep things really compact. Because man, you got to be smart to write this stuff. I'm telling you, because
Yeah.
sentence structure. I mean, something that we would talk about in a huge long hour debate. How are you going to put that into a few sentences?
Yeah,
And
true.
every word has to be so precise and concise.
Okay.
What word are you choosing? So regardless of genre, either way, you still have to know your settings, your world buildings, your characters, your good guys, your bad guys, either way. Now let's have fun. And
Yeah,
now let's move forward into okay, so now why is this person bad and what is the protagonist going to learn
right.
by defeating the antagonist, the
Okay.
monster? What are they going to
Okay.
learn about themselves? And
Yeah,
either
it
way,
sounds like just because it's middle grade does not mean that it's like you don't spend as much time on the book. Like it's not easier at
you
all.
spend
It
longer.
almost sounds harder. But yeah, so like if you're thinking you're just going to get rich quick by just churning out books for middle grade, you might need to think that through again.
You might need to do yeah, we can talk about that another time. But yes, do your research. That is for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and I mean, kids will DNF a book faster than you can, say
Uh-huh.
banshee, quite frankly. So, where you said that you were writing an article and you talk about little goblins or monsters every month, where do people find you to look into this more with you?
My initials are RAD, and I just think that's the coolest thing ever. So thanks, Mom. My company is called Rad Notes Book Coaching. So you
Okay.
can find me at radnotesbookcoaching.com. There's plenty of links in there that you can sign up for my newsletters. You can sign up for my Creatures of the Month, and I do love helping people pitch to agents. I find it more fun to research for other people to find agents than to do it for myself. Because
I mean, yes, we all
yeah.
do. All right, we will have the link in the show notes below. But otherwise, if you guys are driving, it's RAD notes bookcoaching.com, right?
That is correct.
I like
And
that.
you know
It's
what,
easy
we
to
one
remember.
thing we didn't discuss, Kat, that we really have to put an emphasis on
Okay.
is middle grade. It's not my favorite, but it has to have a happy ending.
Oh,
I'm
okay. Why is that?
Again, we're going back to the child mentality.
Okay.
There's so many bad things happening in the world. Things can feel really negative, and it can really press down on your emotions, your psyche. So they need a happy ending at the end.
Okay.
Monster dies or gets sent back to the other another planet or however you want to do it. And then yay, and a little cheer at the end. So we got to
Okay.
have a happy ending for this age group.
So we kind of need the protagonist to get a win.
The protagonist has to have a win at the end.
Okay.
Yes. Correct.
Okay. Oh, but before we go, I have a question for you. If you're going to write a series for kids' books, are you like cliffhangers are a big no-no in adults? I don't know why. Like, but what about kids' books? Do you have cliffhangers or not really?
I would say, the cliffhangers happen at the end of every chapter.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if it ends with, Susie grabbed an open box of candy off the counter, and she went to go get a piece of candy, and, a finger was in there.
Ew.
And then the next chapter would be she threw it on the ground, it was a rubber
Mm.
finger, and Joey's in the bushes laughing, or, her brother's in the corner
Oh.
laughing. So, that's
You
one of
almost
the
like cut that action is the end of the scene, and then you start a new scene with kind of like that's curious. There are lots of rules to middle grade. Okay. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna have to learn more about this if I'm ever gonna write a middle grade. All right. So I think that you all should definitely go check out her Rebecca's website because it sounds to me like there are just these really interesting ways that you organize your story that just makes it more interesting for kids that you wouldn't do it for adults. And
You know what? A story is a story regardless.
yeah,
It's
and those
just
are things that you can help people with for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Writing for the different age groups can be a lot of fun. Next time we'll talk about young adult, really dive into that.
Yes. Oh my gosh, because young adult, then we're just gonna go with like I grew up with the Scream movies. So we should do a deep dive into Scream and how it got boring at some point.
Actually, I just watched a documentary on that.
You did not. A
Yeah, I did.
documentary on the movies?
It's called Greatest Fears, I think it is. It's like on AMC at like midnight on Fridays. I tape it or record it. I don't know. I'm aging myself again.
We're aging ourselves out.
Sorry. No, it goes through like all the like what this one was just about all the tropes, and they go into the
Right,
Scream tropes and the making fun of don't do something stupid and go down the big hole, and you'll never come home. Or didn't you ever watch scary movies? And they'll talk about it because it's part of the fun.
right, right.
It's
It
talking
is part
about
of the fun. But just like any other genre, we love our tropes. We love it when the girl goes deeper into the house and doesn't leave the house. Like we just love it because we're humans. I don't know. We just love kind of those things, the same recognizable traits of a story.
right,
Yeah.
right,
And it
and that's what makes us feel good to know what's going to happen. So that keeps us in story mode, not watching the nightly news.
yes, thank
Which is
God.
scarier than any book I've ever written or wrote
Exactly.
or listened to or read, whatever.
So there's no rhyme or reason, basically. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for talking to us about this. We will definitely have you back on to talk about middle school or to high school and then adults and or other things as well. So at the moment, it is still October. So I want you guys to go check out radnotesbookcoaching.com, especially if you want to get into middle grade or any grade horror. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks, Kat. Thanks for having me.